So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Los Angeles chapter of OpenIDEO's first event of 2021, the K-12 education panel discussion on what we learned in the COVID era and how we move forward. My name is Noah Bennett. Most of you don't know me. I'm one of the two new leaders of our chapter this year, along with my partner, Chris Thomas. And as most of you know, some of you know, this event is part of OpenIDEO's Education Reopen Challenge. After a long year where we've all been separated from one another, mostly interacting virtually on platforms like this one, our community institutions like our schools are starting to come back together. And we have the opportunity to take advantage of this transition period to improve the status quo. So the question our challenge asks of us after our communities have been challenged by isolation this year is, how might we strengthen school communities as sites reopen by highlighting solutions that reconnect people and enhance collective well-being, teaching, and learning? That's a really, really broad topic, but that's the way we like it. We want to facilitate the generating of ideas that benefit our education system in a lot of different ways, be it reconnecting our communities, coming up with more collaborative teaching and learning strategies, and generally pursuing collective health and well-being, specifically in these school communities.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that intro, Noah. Appreciate it. My name is Chris. I'm the other chapter organizer for the LA chapter. Really excited to be with all of you today. And thank you so much for spending some of your Sunday with us. So really, before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that some of you may have already contributed or submitted your ideas to the OpenIDEO challenge. Some of you may be waiting to learn a little bit more about what's happening before you share your ideas. This is a great opportunity to ask your questions and collect more information from this amazing group of panelists that we have. I'm going to encourage all of you to think of questions that you'd like our panelists to address and submit them in the Q&A section of the chat room, which you should be able to find on the top right of your screen. Noah, make sure also to like the ideas that you see that others have posted that you want to see our panelists address. Noah and I are going to select the most popular questions and present those. But to just get started, Noah and I are going to start with a couple questions and then open it up to our floor of participants. Thank you again so much for being here. To get into discussion, what we're going to do is have our panelists introduce themselves. First, we're going to have each of you give us your name, where you're from, maybe a little bit about your professional background, and then tell us something you are looking forward to doing once everyone is vaccinated and it's safe to go out and mingle and be social again. Okay, Erica, we're going to start with you.
Erica, you have muted yourself.
I should know better because I teach on Zoom. So happy Sunday, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Erica Rhodes. I'm an elementary school teacher. I teach 5th and 6th grade, primarily math and science. And I'm also running for Congress in California's 30th Congressional District in 2022. And I am very, very excited to have this conversation. It's really, really important that we talk about education, education reform, and what education looks like post-pandemic. And what I'm looking forward to the most after when everything opens back up is just seeing all my friends and families in a normal sense. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. Aaron?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation. My name is Aaron Ferguson. I'm from Camarillo, California, and I'm the Ed Tech Learning Design Coach for Oxnard Union High School District, which is a ridiculously long and confusing title. I'm a coordinator. I'm a teacher removed from the district, removed from the classroom that I manage Canvas and do some stuff like that, do some kind of fun things. But the thing I'm most excited about is a crab boil. We used to throw these big parties and just have like a big crab boil in the backyard and have people together and, you know, music and fun. And I miss that. I really do miss getting together and having fun. So excited for that. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I definitely want to invite to one of those things. Sarah, why don't you go next?
Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. Thank you all for having me today. Sarah Mooney. I'm the coordinator for civic engagement in the Office of the Superintendent at LA Unified. Erin, similarly long title. I send a lot of emails. I think that's kind of the gist of what I do. No, but I'm coming from the nonprofit space. So one of my roles is to bridge and connect and develop relationships and bring in some of the really fantastic ideas of our nonprofit partners, which LA is rich with, into our district. And kind of push our district around equity, around innovation. So just very privileged to be in this role. I've been there about 3.5 months, so I still am not quite a district person, still see myself a little bit more on the nonprofit side. Let's see, looking forward to after the pandemic, live music. Not necessarily like the crowds, but just seeing artists get up there and do their thing. That will be that's always very inspiring and exciting for me. So thank you for having me.
Sarah, as you said that, I'm realizing that Noah and I also need to share what we're excited about, because we didn't do that in our intro, and you stole my answer. I mean, I'll chime in now. I cannot wait till I can go to a concert again. I miss that experience so much. All right. Would you like to introduce you as Gabby or Gabrielle?
Just call me Gabby.
Gabby. Okay.
Easiest. Hi, everyone. I'm Gabby, and I work in the storytelling space. Used to work in storytelling in Homeland Security and humanitarian aid, but now I work with entertainment companies here in LA. I think my most important role is being a mother. So my perspective here is of the parent. I have a 5-year-old who just got introduced to school in the COVID environment, and that's been a very interesting experience. There's a lot to say there. But I think, you know, one of the things, especially thinking about her, what I look forward to after COVID is actually having like a post-COVID birthday celebration, so she can have her family around and experience that excitement, because she's missed it twice now. But thank you for having me. Look forward to contributing.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for introducing yourselves, panelists. Again, really excited to have such a great group of people with us to share their insights on education and what's happening.
Yeah, feel free, everybody else in the audience, if you want to share your answer in the general chat. Yeah. I'll say I'm excited to get back on airplanes more often. Didn't think I missed that process until I had it taken away from me so rudely. So turns out I like that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. We're going to start off with some questions that we have prepared for you guys. Like Chris said before, for everybody else, please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A chat, or if you'd like, you can send them in DMs to Chris or myself, and we'll pick up some of your questions from there. But just to start, all of us in the audience here are coming at this from outside of the education space, or at least most of us, and are constantly hearing about the impacts of COVID on industries, on different people's lives, and there's a lot of assumptions and conjecture. So I want to start with one of the most broad questions we have for you guys. What do you think are some of the biggest ways that remote learning has impacted students and families? Because we all have our preconceptions from the outside, but from the inside, from watching that yourselves, we want to hear what some of the hidden impacts are. So I'm gonna just put that out there, and whoever wants to answer first, take it.
I can jump in real quick.
Okay. Okay, I'll just quickly, I think I've noticed the change in my eldest, where and it's probably the most worrisome thing for me, which is her craving to be around people, but almost being scared of folks. And I'm trying to think of, how does that impact her in school going forward? How does that impact all the relationship that she's going to have to create in order to thrive in life in the future? So that's been the biggest impact over here.
Yeah, I would agree. I have a almost 4-year-old, and he missed out on like some preschool. We're getting ready. He was going to go. He was excited, and then it stopped. So there's some social stuff that I think he's missed out on. And I know we're probably going to turn this around and think about this from the teacher perspective, but as a person at the district trying to think about situations like this, really it's opened eyes for teachers and said, hey, there's a lot of things at home that we don't know about. There's a lot of things that they're struggling with that we just, like, look at this. You're getting to see people's homes. And we got to see that a little bit with some students. And it's been telling how much there's other things in these students' lives that, that math worksheet doesn't matter as much. So eye-opening.
I think just to build on these points, not a parent, so I just want to be very empathetic and appreciative and just inspired by our parents who are doing double, triple duty all the time. I think the impact, and I think about not only is this a time where we're all at home, but this is a time where we're dealing with a lot of racial reckoning, a huge economic challenge for a lot of our families. So schools are kind of a microcosm of the community that they're in, right? So I think about all of those impacts, and I can't pick just one. So, right, all of our students have a lot of different needs and a lot of different things that need to be in place for them to feel happy and ready to learn. So I just wanted to flag that it's very encompassing and it's very different. I think we've talked there's this phrase that people use that it is highlighted inequity, and even though that it's kind of played out at this point, it is so true. The different experiences that our students and families have had, depending on their income, depending on their race, depending on the neighborhood they're in, depending on the broadband infrastructure in their community. And I think really in LA Unified, you have a huge range. And we've seen that really in the desire for folks to return for the last 7 weeks to in-person learning. There's a lot of fear for our families in the Southeast, for example, who have experienced death, sickness. And then you have a lot of families who are a little well off, not as exposed to the virus, could all stay home and be safe. And they're ready to go back. We have 80% wanting to return in certain neighborhoods. So I'm not really answering your question, but just wanted to add some contours in terms of there have been so many different impacts across so many spectrums. And I think a lot of negative impacts have been felt by our families who are living in poverty, who have been historically underserved. So I'll leave that there.
I'll just piggyback off what you're saying. There is great disparities in education. And we saw that we had like over 10,000 kids just at the college level that didn't even have access to technology. We have the internet problem. We have kids that are in learning environments that are not set up for the support system because their parents have to work. There's 2 or 3 kids sharing a device. And I think what it did was it exposed how much we need in education, starting with kids and making sure that kids have the resources that they need to be successful. I think it also exposed how amazing teachers are, and that teachers should be paid way more money, because teachers had to take on so much during this pandemic to provide a curriculum online, which is very, very, very hard to do. I'm thinking of like kindergarten teachers, like you're thinking like kids are learning how to read online. That is a really hard thing to do. It's not like when you're in the class and you have manipulatives, you can use music. The kids are not like rolling on the chairs and stuff like that. So I think it also showed that teachers are worth their weight in gold, and that we should be compensating teachers way more. And I think this is the moment where we really, really buckle down and reform our education system, and that we make sure it's equitable, that we make sure that there's hands-on learning, that we reimagine what education can be, because this is the time to do it. And so I think to the parents, I think the parent and teacher relationship has completely changed, because I think parents actually for once really see what it's like to be a teacher and what teachers have to do. And we're more than just babysitters, that we're responsible for educating kids. And it's not just an easy task, it's a skill. And it takes a lot of creativity, innovation, and imagination in order to be an effective teacher in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for that insight. Yeah, that was beautiful. And a couple of you already touched on this. Noah, did you have something to say?
Yeah, so actually, I want to dive right into something a few of you have mentioned already, which is this idea of social development in addition to educational development in schools. I think Gabby and Aaron both touched on that early on. And hey, Erica, what you just said about kids spinning around in their chairs brought my attention back to that issue. I'm hearing that there's been a lot of impact on that type of learning for young students. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about strategies that you guys have seen this year to deal with that, to deal with not being able to have classroom social learning, and how effective some of those strategies have been.
So from a teacher standpoint, we've been on Zoom, and what we've had to do is mute kids, right? So we've had to mute them, so they haven't really been in a space where they can express their thoughts or ideas or ask questions the way that they would normally do in the classroom. So I think moving forward, we need to be very intentional about giving kids a platform to speak up and talk and communicate, because that is a skill in and of itself. Being able to respectfully agree or disagree, be able to advocate for yourself, to ask for what you need. And so I think in the classroom, I think we have to really move to the whole child, make that a real big priority, and making sure all of their needs are met. And so to do that would be project-based learning, where kids are able to interact with one another, be able to problem solve and create those spaces. And I also think it's also an opportunity, if it's safe to do so, really push field trips, because there's no other way to build community in a classroom than taking them outside of the classroom and to do all those really fun and engaging things. So I think those are ways that we can start getting kids to communicate and build community. Some of the ways.
Nice.
Awesome. And I think one of the things too that we want to highlight in this discussion that some of you started to speak to was the experience from the teacher's perspective. What comes to mind, and maybe we can go to our two educators on the panel. What comes to mind as the biggest ways that your role, your life has been impacted by distance learning?
So I'm actually out of the classroom this last year. We're in a kind of a unique situation where we had fires the last couple of years before the pandemic. So we thought, we probably need to think about maybe we're not going to be able to be in campus one day, and we have to have ways of doing this. So we were 5 minutes ahead of the whole pandemic. Didn't really help that much, but the idea was we were trying to figure out how do we create like a snow day for fires, and but it's a smoke day, and how do we have learning still happen even if we can't be physically on site? Now that's what we've been going through this past year, and it's taken a lot of training. I can tell you that the teachers in the district I work with have been putting in so many hours of training that our timesheets are backed up because of the amount of PD they've been doing. It's amazing. We love how much they've been doing, and it's been consistent for the last 3 years because of the Thomas Fire. It really set the tone. Erica, you brought up a different point that I was pricked my ear a little bit about curriculum and how much teachers spend time building curriculum. That is, it can't be said enough. I can sit here, we can have this meeting, and all the stuff that takes to prep for this meeting. Think about that from a teacher's perspective. Every hour of teaching has 2 or 3 times as many hours of preparation. And we're all first-year teachers this year because we've never done this before. So there's a lot of like, how do we do this? One of the ways that we've approached it, and I think that more districts should do it, is we have pre-built content. And we have, we've got 45 classes that are available directly for teachers. They can use them any way they want to do it. And they are 100% customizable. So we use the platform Canvas and because it worked for us, but the teachers can import this stuff into their course and they have an entire course built. They don't have to do a single thing in terms of building content. If they want to, they can adapt everything, but they can start from somewhere, because the idea is, I think back to being like that first year teacher. You get there, it's like teacher edition of a book. There's not a lot of support, right? And how do we provide teachers the ability to support them with curriculum so they can fight the survival of the first year teacher? Same thing that's happening right now. So our big move has been providing pre-built content that's 100% customizable, and it's been incredibly helpful for our teachers because, I mean, we're trying to give them time, and there's not enough of it. And if we can give them time by building that content, that's been helpful.
I just go for it.
Just very, very quickly, as the parent of a very young child, we're in that group where, for the most part, the parents are sitting next to the kids watching the teachers teach. And so I just want to say that, we see, for those of us who need to sit next to our children, we see how hard you're working. For my daughter's kindergarten teacher, for the first several weeks, I didn't tell her this, but I could just see the huge bags under her eyes. And I just knew that she was up. I could imagine that she was up all night, every night, the day before, just preparing for the lessons to go as smoothly as she did, as they have. And so I just want to tell the educators, both who are speaking, thank you, and also who are listening in and thinking of, offering solutions to this challenge. Your work is noticed, and on behalf of all the parents, we thank you for the extra 10 miles that you've gone for our children.
Gabby, I think it's so dope that you did that you acknowledge that, because it is really, really hard to teach. And on Zoom, it has been incredibly challenging. And I happen to work with some of the most amazing teachers that are out there, and they are relentless and invested in your kids. And I think people sometimes don't realize, but your kids kind of become our kids in a sense, right? Like, we care about their well-being, we have their best interests at heart. But going back to like the partnership, it's a partnership, right? So like online to teach chemistry, we turned the kitchens into chemistry labs, right? And so it took the parents to get the food so we can do food chemistry, to be able to teach the periodic table, all the grade level standards for chemistry. But we couldn't have done it without you. So I also want to throw the thank you back to parents like you who've been supportive and helped elevate these really cool ideas to make it meaningful and engaging for kids. And I just want to say about the impact that it's had. I think this is the time where we really have to meet this moment again. I want to keep stressing this, of elevating our education system and rethinking the future of education, technology, automation. Kindergartners, again, are learning to read online. So they're learning how to use devices before they can even read. So what does that mean from a curricular standpoint? That means that we need to invest in technology and make sure that we keep up with the time. So on a global level, we can be competitive. And I think that's where the money needs to go to, and the investment. I think we need to re-scrap and just start over with the whole way in which we teach and like what we are teaching kids. And to Sarah's point about social justice, making sure that we're teaching the truth in school, that we're talking about all these different aspects of history, and making sure that we're having those rich conversations about equality in the classroom.
I want to follow up real quick with Gabby, and then I have a question for you, Sarah. Earlier on, Erica talked about having a bit of a different relationship now with parents. Gabby, can you tell me a little bit about more about that from your side? Now that you've sat in the classroom for your youngest, you said in kindergarten, right? I'm gonna go ahead and assume that for your oldest, you weren't in the kindergarten classroom.
Sorry, my eldest daughter kindergarten. My youngest actually had right at the beginning of the pandemic, which was crazy as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I might have misspoke, but my young daughter, who's my eldest, is in kindergarten.
Okay, then I want to know what your perspective on the relationship that you have with the teachers has been.
Yeah, I when we started this year, I think the parents were under the assumption, and I think that the teachers at my daughter's school were under the assumption that they'd be probably back in school within a few weeks. Like maybe tops, they'd have to return in the winter, but they'll probably be back in school in October. When we realized that wasn't going to happen, this shift changed where, the things that I see my daughter's having a challenge with, or the things that, I think are really important to help her with her learning, I'm going to really have to drive the boat here. Even though I'm not the trained person in this, I'm going to have to drive the boat. And so the teacher has really been a guide to me. There's only so much that she can do in the short time that they have on screen. It's a pointer to me about what I need to do for the rest of the day with my daughter to follow up as best as I can. And what that's done is it's created this sense of ownership over my daughter's educational journey that's going to stay with the both of us until she, is out of the house on her own will when she's 18. And the understanding, the insights that I have into the unique strengths and challenges that she has as a student, I've seen them up close for myself now. And again, it creates a sense of ownership and understanding with my own daughter that I think will have transformed my relationship with her teachers for really forever.
Yeah. That's the drive the boat phrase is really interesting. That's a very different way of thinking about it. Sarah, I want to switch gears a little bit. Earlier on, from a more practical standpoint, you talked about some of the inequality in the classroom and how remote learning has, I think, this isn't the word you use, but exacerbated some of those problems. Could you give us a few specific examples? And then I'm really interested in hearing if you've seen any initiatives or strategies to tackle that, and what level of success you've seen.
Oh, that's a big question. Okay, so the first part was what are the inequities, and the second part was okay.
Yeah, so what are some of the inequities, and then later, what are some strategies that you've seen to tackle them? Okay.
And do you want inequities on, sorry, I'm a very specific person. Do you want inequities on learning? I mean, because that's, I think to my earlier point, and I think at least from the central office, which I want to be very aware that is not always rooted in the direct experiences of teachers and students and parents. So just want to be very clear, that's kind of my lens.
Yeah.
I think one thing that we have a couple of metrics that we've been watching closely. One, simply engagement is the student signing on. Are they engaged in the class? And that's, we have our kind of online platform that they can use to log in and then do the coursework and everything. There have been some students that log on and then log off. There have been some students who just have their cameras off the whole time, so we don't really know if they're engaged. I know high school students who are, have one earbud in at work while they're class and then working somewhere trying to support their family. Other students who are helping their younger siblings stay on and stay focused, right? If their parents have to work. So engagement, just simply being present with the course content is one thing. Another thing that the superintendent has had a real laser focus on is literacy for our younger learners, our first graders. Where are our students at with just reading comprehension? And I think with I'll be very frank, coming from an outside advocacy lens, we have not always served, and I don't think there's many school districts across the country that have served our Black and Brown students, especially our low-income Black and Brown students, well, or in an equitable way. And we see that in the data anywhere you look, nationally, locally, school by school, et cetera. So we see that again in terms of our literacy rates for students. So those are just two that I'll kind of focus on, because it's everywhere. I come from a very critical race lens, and you see inequity across the board wherever you look. So in terms of what has been working, I just want to highlight something, and I hope that we can think about this for what the work looks like in the future, right? Is kind of mastery-based or learning acceleration. So how do we, and again, highlighting the amazing work of teachers, if you get a small group of students who are struggling with learning or with literacy in their first grade year, and you put them even in a small Zoom room with a teacher, we've seen, I'm not going to get the numbers off the top of my head, but we've seen an acceleration in learning of these students being on track, right, at grade level reading. And that's just that extra time, just 30 minutes in a small group with a teacher who can build a relationship with them, do a deep dive into some of the literacy pieces that they need. And that has really, we're excited to it's been a pilot this year. We love our pilots and then scale. So we're excited to kind of bring that in and really target it into the students who are far below proficiency with their reading. And then we're also going to look at what this means for math skills and critical thinking skills. So that kind of acceleration, that targeted support, building relationships with our educators, those are some things that I think can kind of help close some of the learning gaps. I think there's other gaps around health and mental wellness. One of the things we did was a hotline this year, just because we can't provide the services in person and we can't see if a child's camera is off, we can't see if they're struggling. That's been really tough, right, for reporting or pulling a student after class saying, are you okay? But we opened a hotline that has tens of thousands of calls from LA Unified families phoning in and saying that they need support. So those are kind of gaps that we've seen, I think, that have kind of emerged with the pandemic, but have always been there, and some strategies that we've used to kind of meet the moment and really support young people. Yeah, Erica.
Sarah, can I ask you a quick question? I just want to ask you a quick question. Did you say that when the kids go into small breakout groups, that the literacy has improved? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. Yeah.
And how did you guys measure that?
It's Dibble scores.
Okay.
So, yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
We don't have any data to prove it, but our teachers have been providing us a lot of anecdote that says if we can decrease the community size, we can increase the engagement. So using breakouts or having specified times for this group of students to show up here, and then using that period a little bit more uniquely, maybe like a station rotation kind of an idea. We've seen a lot of success from our teachers, and you know what? That's bringing relationship back into the classroom. So teachers feel more valued at that point. And there's more like hey, I enjoy what I'm doing, because if you're just talking at a screen, Erica, it's just sometimes it just drains the life out of you. So.
I hate teaching on Zoom. I'm an in-class teacher. That's just my style. It's my jam. I'm hands-on all day, every day. I think what Sarah said is very important, because what happened was the achievement gap pretty much just had a dynamite thrown at it, and it just widened even more for Black and Brown students that live in low-income areas. And then that sets the tone for why we have such an increase in prison rates. We have the school to prison pipeline for those that are not familiar. And I think that literacy piece is why that pipeline is there, right? Because we have kids that are not able to read. So we know that fourth graders, that I think it's the percentage, 83% of fourth graders are not reading at proficient level. We have 85% of low income families that don't even have books in their homes because they can't afford it. And we know that in prisons, 3 out of 5 people are illiterate. They can't even read. And so when we think of education equity, is making sure that kids are able to read at grade level. Because if you're not a fully literate person in 5th grade, 6th grade and on is hell for these kids. And then that's when like we see that there's like they're getting in trouble and they're going down the wrong path unless they have a teacher that really starts to take ownership and help them and guide them, or there's intervention. And what we haven't talked about, which I think is important, is the foster care system. So when kids age out of the system, that has had a profound impact on education right now, because we have kids in the foster care system that have not been able to access curriculum or instruction. And what happens to those kids? And so I think I want us to really not make sure we're not watering down the disparities in education, because it is profound. It's prolific, and we have a lot of work that we have to do, because every single student has a right to be able to read, write, compute, math, and think critically and problem solve. I think that's just a human right, in my opinion. And so I love that, Sarah, you're advocating for low income Black and brown kids. I think that's really important. But I just want to make sure that I want to paint the picture for real, that we have kids that are really, really below grade level.
Thank you so much for those thoughts on equity in education. We have our first audience question that's also about access and equity. I want to read it and then allow you all to comment on it. The pandemic has revealed accessibility issues in special education, where many students are not receiving auxiliary services like speech language pathologists, occupational therapists, and paraprofessionals that are legislated by IEPs. People with disabilities also have much more trouble accessing technology, including remote learning. How might we enact changes that foster inclusivity in education for all children?
For our district, one of
the
nice things with our district was that a lot of those groups we just spoke about right there were in a smaller class size. So we were able to return to in-person classrooms with those students faster. And I'm at a high school district, so we have nothing but high school. So thank you to all the elementary school teachers doing that. I mean, honestly, the stuff you guys do blows my mind. And how to make an online class for a kindergartner. All right, put that aside. But we looked at these subgroups and said, hey, they fit under the 14-to-1 or whatever the numbers were at the time. Let's get them back in classroom as much as we possibly can faster. So they were our priority. It was harder to deal with the logistical challenge of high school. The other thing is they don't do the period switch as much. If we're talking about some of our sped students, not all, but it was a little bit of an easier logistical challenge to get them back in campus based on the numbers, the classroom size.
Encouraging. Does anyone else have any perspective to lend on this particular subject? That's a great question, and certainly a group that we need to be conscious of as we think about equity, in addition to the Black and brown students who are struggling.
I've got another question for everybody.
Okay. No, ask your question, then I'll ask one more.
Actually, you go first. You go first, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, this is related to a lot of the discussion that we've already had. We've talked at length about the change that teachers and families and students have had to negotiate over the past year. And some of you already started to speak to some of the exciting things to have emerged in the past year as far as changes that might be persistent into the future. I'm curious to know what are some of the most exciting opportunities that have come about in the past year as a result of the pandemic, some of the things that we've learned as educators that we want to implement moving forward and be more intentional about moving forward.
I think life skill courses. I think there's been more talk about the importance of life skill courses in schools. That's like financial literacy, wood shop, home economics, just basic life skills, things that you need, because we have to, again, thinking of the whole child, making sure kids are able to transition from, childhood to adult life. And adulting's hard, right? And so I think it's really nice that that's being talked about. And I really love the fact that technology. Teachers were able to get what Erin was mentioning in PD on how to use technology as a tool in the classroom. So I think it should still be present, but as a tool, not where we just have kids on Zoom. Obviously, that's not the best learning environment for all kids. And I think that when we think of like the future too, I think we value education more now. And that's really nice to see, is that people are really starting to see the value of teachers, the value of education, and how it sets, just how it pretty much is the root of a lot of our problems in terms of like, it solves a lot of our problems. Forgive me, I misspoke. It solves a lot of our problems in making sure that we have an educated society.
Add to this, I think one of the best things that's come out of it is just even the space to ask the question, knowing that there's an opportunity to do something real. You know, as someone who wasn't at all in the education space before, I've heard this surrounding question of like, hey, something's wrong with our education system, but it kind of seemed like this big behemoth that's just going to exist and change incrementally. And it seems like with this, that there's a real question and understanding in all parts of like, hey, not only has this not worked, but life is going to be very different on the other side of this. And how can we use this moment to change, you know, in a way that's significant and important? The challenge is that everyone is exhausted. Everyone is tired. So how, you know, who can move forward and who can support these efforts going forward is, you know, something to be addressed. But even just having the chance to ask in a genuine and meaningful way, I think is one of the biggest things that's come out of this time.
And two of you guys, Chris and Gabby, said music. I think the things that we often take for granted are like music, right? So I think this kind of shed light on the value of the arts and making sure we're investing in art programs and how important art is to society and music is to society. So I think it really shows that these are not programs that we should defund. They're programs that we should invest in.
I think I'm very appreciative for everyone's comments. They have not usually this energetic on a Sunday morning, but so I think at least for public schools, there's a ton of money coming in from the state and the feds right now, and not a whole, I mean, there's parameters and there's a requirement to engage community, which is very exciting. But there's a real opportunity to invest in programs like the arts that we haven't necessarily fully funded in the past. I think that's one thing I keep hearing is how do we get to Gabby's point, like the joy of learning, because people are tired. It can't just be, all right, everyone, we're going to do a bunch of credit recovery and sit you in a classroom. It's like, no, let's really talk about enrichment programs in addition to, you know, the kind of standards-based education that we've talked about. So there's a lot of money coming in. Let's keep that going. Let's make it not just a one-time stimulus check. Let's continue to fund at that level. Really excited. We're getting a couple $100s more per pupil in LA Unified, which is a game changer. And other things that I'm really excited about is just this emphasis, right, on the joy of learning, on social emotional learning, and supports the importance of mental wellness for our educators, for our staff, and for our students and our families. One thing that we did at LA Unified that I'm extremely proud of to come in on the tail end is feeding people. Food is important. How do we just feed people? Really, no questions asked in a lot of ways. Over the last year, 120 plus million meals to anyone who walked onto our school sites and was hungry. And we're still doing that for families. We're not saying, show us your ID or how many students you have. Like, tell us what you need and we can provide it for you. So that's been a huge blessing. And then one thing on the teaching and learning that I alluded to a little bit with Primary Promise is this learning acceleration piece. Some of our students are straight up 1.5 years behind from where they need to be. How do we can't make up for lost time. Time and money, huge resources in schools, but how can we really accelerate learning and we're exploring mastery-based grading for our students in the next few years, right? That's not about how do you just go through the sequence and regurgitate the information, but how do you demonstrate what you know and how you've applied it? So, and all of that is possible with more funding. So again, we're kind of in this, Gabby and Eric, you've talked about this is a really pivotal moment, like let's take advantage of it. So those are a couple of things that I'm excited for that have come out of this terrible, stressful, exhausting time, but hopeful for the future.
How about you, Aaron? Anything exciting and hopeful?
Sure.
coming out of this?
We constantly think about all students, and the truth is not one solution works for all students. So getting away from the idea that schools have to be standardized and every school has to be the exact same way. And I'm in a smaller school district than LAUSD, obviously. We're about 18,000 students, 11 high schools, and each high school has its own culture, tradition, and we're Oxnard Plains, we're agriculture, we're low income, to Camarillo, where it's not so low income. We have a variety of, Oxnard Shores, we got $1 million homes on the beach, so it's a weird situation, but we let our schools develop their own identity and culture, academy pathways, a lot of stuff like that. What I see really is the opportunity here, though, is flexibility, and that means scheduling. So thinking about high schools, 9th, 10th, you go to school, but 11th and 12th, let's provide you opportunities to take a hybrid class, and I don't mean hybrid in terms of concurrent learning. I don't think that was a wrong branding. We should not be calling that hybrid. Hybrid learning is I come in 2 days a week instead of 5 days a week, and I have my entire class on those 2 days a week. Or I can provide access to a teacher on those other days and then get one-on-one help. We can provide our students that, a lot of our students are providing for their family's income, and they need to have the ability of flexibility of working in flexible schedules. So hybrid, online, face-to-face. And, maybe as a student, I can take 2 classes in class, 1 hybrid and 1 purely online, because that's the schedule that I want. I think we should rethink this. And Erica brought this up at the very beginning. It's broken right now. Everything's in shambles. Let's just put it back in the right way. Let's forget what it was. Let's talk about what it can be, and let's go there. So flexibility of scheduling is really what I'm kind of putting my heart right now. So
yeah, what Aaron just said about school culture has given me a question for Gabby, actually. Like we've talked about, three of our panelists here have been part of this education community for longer than you, because you're new to that as a parent. And so my question is, I remember from when I was in elementary school that my school had a culture and it had a community that felt unique. And I'm wondering, during this year, when you've been doing school from home, is there any point, any event, anything that happened that at that moment you felt, I feel connected to the community of my child's school? Is there anything that made you feel that way this year?
At the very beginning, I know that the administrators are working really hard, the teachers are working really hard, but not having that touch point with the school beforehand, it's hard to ourselves to the identity that perhaps the other parents and students have. At the very beginning, a lot of us parents connected on an app, and we were all trying to figure out the schedule and get into a rhythm. We were all asking each other questions like, where is this glue stick and where is this worksheet? And it was that communication that made it feel like, looking back, like, okay, yeah, we're in this together. We don't know where we're going, but at least we're not alone. But as we found our rhythm, that's fallen off quite a bit. So it's been a weird experience, but I would say at the very beginning is when I felt that the most.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, I suppose. Good to hear that the school made an effort to do that.
Gabby, I just to add real quick, I think you bring up a really good point. And one thing that schools have not always been great at is communication, and providing either communication from the district or the school site or from the teacher. And I hope that this might shine a little bit of a mirror towards us and say, hey, we need to do a better job of that. And it might be, weekly newsletters saying some stuff, or providing one centralized source of information. Social media has been hard for a lot of institutions that weren't really built to adapt, and the education system is one of them. So I think putting more emphasis on bringing in professionals that actually understand how to use these platforms, actually understand how to market to parents, and understand how this works. I think that's important. And the more we can increase the communication, the better, because there's a lot of people that are just lost, and that's not okay.
Thanks for that, Aaron. Appreciate that insight. Communication makes a lot of things easier, right? I have a question for Erica. Really curious, specifically given the fact that you're running for Congress. Can you tell us a little bit about how or what you learned or experienced this past year may have impacted your education reform platform?
So I literally filed for 2 reasons: George Floyd and kids not having access to technology to be able to participate in remote learning. And my end goal is to be on the education committee in Congress. And so what I feel, and I think I've said this multiple times on this, is that we have to start investing in young people. We have to start taking education seriously, because an educated child benefits everyone. And so I'll just use my platform, for example. So for my congressional race, for my campaign, I've been intentional about having young people participate in it. And they actually run a section of it called Our Kids Have a Voice Too. And so basically it empowers young people to be civically engaged, have ownership, be able to get experiences for their resume, etc. So I feel like even if I lose, good comes out of this. They started a lending library program. So we've installed 3 lending libraries in our community already. They came up with different webinars and with different congressional leaders. And so I say all that to say is that I feel like we as the adults have a responsibility to cultivate the next generation of leaders, because we don't want to create more followers. We want to create leaders, people that can lead us and elevate us to the next level. Eventually, we're going to die, right? And so we want to make sure that they're left with the skills in order to bring the next generation along. And so when I think of education reform, I think of that is our future. And like Gabby's little kids, her 2 babies, that's what we're fighting for. That's why we're all on this call right now, and that's what we're invested. All the teachers, we're fighting for the kindergarten, or these young ones that things are out of their control. They don't get to vote. And so my congressional, this is so personal to me, because when George Floyd died, I was like, I thought that could be my dad. And this just to see how the impact it had in my classroom, and having to have those really difficult conversations for them to see their neighborhood looted and to have those conversations. These kids are experiencing things that we probably don't even, we probably kind of ignored to some degree. And so for me, from a congressional level, is to make sure kids have a space and they're empowered to be a part of this country and the civic journey. And I also wanted to say that when Sarah mentioned having to feed families, no matter what, I think that's wonderful that they do that. But I also feel like it's unfortunate that we live in a country where we have to do that. You know what I mean? And so it just sets this tone of like, what are we doing? Do we not have the political will and courage to do better? I'm literally driving down the street, someone waking up on the country. That is our country right now. We have this crazy amount of homelessness, and these are things that we could solve. We know that way to solve. We just have to do the work. And so for me, this is why I chose to file and run, whether I win or lose. It's to raise awareness to these issues. And when you mentioned special disabilities, I'm just going to wait. So one more thing, I promise. I was thinking about the deaf community and their lack of access. Like my district has the largest deaf community in the country, and no one even talked about the disparities, the lack of access that they received during the pandemic. Think about it. If you were a deaf or hard of hearing person and someone wearing a mask, you can't even lip read. The communication barrier that they've had to go through, or the police brutality within the deaf community that no one talks about. So I just feel like when I think of education too, it's also educating our society about all the problems that we face and that we can all collectively do better as a community and as people, as citizens.
Thank you so much. We are pretty close to closing out. Yes, snaps. Before we do, I want to throw one thing back to Sarah. Erica brought up that feeding program. We're getting food out through our schools to our communities right now. And like Erica said, it's unfortunate that that's something that we need right now. On the other hand, it's something that we need right now. And that what you said about that program is one of the best examples I've heard so far of something in like the last year that I've heard of something good coming through COVID. And I'm wondering from your perspective, until we can make those big changes that Erica was talking about, until we can make it so that that type of thing isn't necessary through our schools, how can we make programs like that last after the pandemic is over? Do you have any inclination about how we can keep that type of work going through our schools?
Funding, staff, a place on the school site for people to go. I mean, I'm thinking about it. One thing for the for parents to be able to pick up meals on behalf of their students, there had to be an exemption from the state, like a waiver for folks to do that. Let's get rid of the policy, right? If that's the case. I think Erica's spot on. Like, there should be other municipal entities or federal stimulus, whatever it comes from, like other systems in place that can help bolster and support that effort. Other things that we're doing is we have the largest COVID testing program in the country. We have, we're midway through opening 25 school-based vaccination sites for the communities that they're in, and they're in the hardest hit communities in LA Unified. So I mean, schools are, and are the schools that the community, like schools are the hub of a community in so many ways. And I think sometimes that's not always the case, unfortunately, but how can we leverage the brilliant relationships our teachers have, the leadership of our principals within the community? We have communities of schools, which is clusters or feeder patterns of schools. So, and they're leading and they're interfacing with faith leaders and businesses and advocacy organizations within their local communities. So we have the infrastructure. I think that has been demonstrated, but we don't necessarily have the funding to continue to sustain it. California, I'm not sure of the numbers now, but a few years ago, 44th in per pupil spending in the country. And I think it varies because we have a weighted student formula, district by district, but fund, we have the infrastructure. We would love to bring more folks on to help distribute that food, right? We are partnering with our community-based clinics to distribute the vaccines. So again, trusted community folks, we have the infrastructure, we've proven that we can do this, but unfortunately we just need to kind of bolster that funding, or, I don't know if the superintendent would love me saying this, or bolster funding for another capable organization that has the infrastructure to do that. I mean, as long as we can get our students showing up and fed, that's really where my heart is at. And if we have that outcome, then that's good. But we need more dollars to be able to do that in a really comprehensive way.
It's almost like we need more people running for Congress that are teachers, right? No, honestly, it's leadership. I think that's really important, because the people that are in the classroom doing this stuff and understanding this at a human level, they can come and take that knowledge to the next thing. And we don't see enough. Honestly, we've seen a lot of teachers stay where they are, and that's kind of the benefit of the union and the system. You get pretty comfortable, but I applaud you, Erica, for jumping out there and doing something fun. That's great. So thank you.
Yeah, real fun. A lot of great work. We are about at time. We're actually 3 minutes over. I want to be respectful of our panelists' time. Thank you so much for joining us. Noah, did you have one last burning question you want to ask?
I did. So I want to say, yeah, thank you again. This has been so insightful and wonderful. Everybody watching in the chat, Danielle has just posted a link to the Education Reopen Challenge, a place for you to submit your ideas. The deadline is May 16th. So there's still a lot of time to percolate on what you have heard here today and see what comes up. I want to, like Chris said, be respectful of your time. So I'm going to say, try to limit this to like 30 seconds or so. But I want each of our panelists to tell me, is there anything that you wanted the opportunity to say today that you haven't gotten? Something that you wish we had asked you, but we didn't? Maybe take longer than 30 seconds. That's a really tenure. Like, you can have a minute. You can have a minute. But if there's any last thoughts from each of you that you want to make sure people take away from this conversation? I'm just gonna point to one of you. Aaron, you go first.
I'm gonna give my 30 seconds to someone else because I felt we had a great conversation, and I think there's probably some great content coming up here.
Gabby.
I just want to say just a quick. I'd love to see some solutions from those who are listening in. Really thinking about how do we address the trauma that I think this came up with listening to you, Aaron, and Erica and Sarah. How do we address the trauma that our students, our children have experienced over the last year? How do we as a village support that? So I'd love to see some solutions around that.
We're just going left to right on my screen. So Erica, you're next.
I echo what Aaron said. I think this was a really rich conversation, and I appreciate you guys, Noah and Christopher, for organizing this and inviting us to be a part of it. And for everyone on this panel, you guys are extraordinary. So it's an honor.
Awesome.
Sarah?
Echoing the sentiments of just gratitude for my fellow panelists and our hosts for today. I'm just gonna throw something in there that is a little random, but think from the design thinking perspective and having gone through design thinking and around educational challenges, I've looked at a couple of the responses, and a lot of them are classroom based, and that's fantastic. And we need more kind of innovation and support in terms of bringing new ideas into the classroom. But I just want to recognize that there is a huge level of policy. I mean, if anyone's seen an ed code book, it is like this thick and always changing. So I would love to see just an extra challenge of how can our central offices be more effective? How can our state policies, Erica, maybe this one's for you. How can some of our policies change at the statewide level to let some of that innovation that are on classrooms really flourish and be supported in a much more systemic way? Because we have one-off solutions right now that are beautiful and brilliant, but how do we really think about scaling them and creating systems and structures within the bureaucracy that support that that innovation and that kind of equity-minded?
That's getting new people in, new people, new ideas, and yeah, we'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, all four of you. This has been, like I said, so wonderful and so insightful. Everyone, remember to submit your ideas on the open call by May 16th for a chance to develop your idea further with the Open IDEO community and to win $1,000.